Black Bottom was the name for the segregated black community that African Americans were relegated to because Detroit, for a large portion, had covenant laws which restrict black people from buying houses wherever they were available in the city. The Ossian Sweet story, you may know, is an example of this. He attempted to defy a covenant law that existed in that neighborhood. So the majority of African Americans for the large portion of the 20th century lived in Black Bottom, which basically went from Gratiot to Gratiot on one side, Grand River, Jefferson, and I forgot the most eastern border, but it was a large swath of downtown where black folks existed. And Hastings Street was the main thoroughfare. It was the Woodward of Black Bottom, and it was the place where a number of major cultural organizations, entertainment spots, food and whatnot that existed in the community. It was a thriving, dynamic, and exciting part of Detroit.
And the play, Hastings Street,
Right.
you're presenting that, and this is going to be an experience that people can take on the music hall.
Right.
It's going to be taking place July
The
2022, the 21st
through the 31st.
through the end of the month. So you
Right.
got 10 days.
Right.
You can check this out. So
So the show is our fictional presentation of what happened. In 1949, the federal government passed and President Truman signed the Housing Act of 1949. The idea was that was going to usher in what they originally called slum removal, but because that didn't test well,
yeah, you got that right.
they rewrote it into what we call urban renewal. And urban renewal was supposed to, after World War II, invest heavily in urban communities and revitalize them. We had a war dividend. We had a big resource that had been created during the war. We were much more prosperous, and the argument was that this was going to help revitalize our urban core. It was also used by many politicians in communities across this country to disenfranchise African Americans and also brown people and anybody else that wasn't white. If you look at where a number of the areas that were quote unquote designated as slums, they were in these what they would have called minority communities. And so they attacked them with this initiative, with these resources that had been allocated to the cities to raise what they said was the most damaged, the most unreformable, redevelopable parts of the community, the properties. What they ended up doing is actually, as you know, they displaced an entire community of people because there was a second phase that occurred in 1956 with the Interstate Highway Act that was designed on creating the interstate highways throughout so that people's mobility could be greater. What they really were doing was finding ways for whites that were becoming restless living in cities, having the opportunity to quickly live in the suburbs and cut down their travel time. So it was the interstate highway that created the suburbs and exurbs and all the other parts that surrounded many urban cores, and that happened here. So they began with the Housing Act, trying to tear down these buildings. In many cases, the argument was that they were going to redevelop them. They're going to put new housing, new businesses on that land. That never happened. They bought up the land, they displaced people, and when the interstate highway funding came through, they just concreted over and turned it into 375 for the most part. So they really decimated an entire core community that existed here.